Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to part 4 of Spring Security video series. In this video, we will be mainly focusing on configuring memory authentication for a basic Spring Boot application. Let me just give a quick overview of what we have done in past three videos. In first video, we have created a basic Spring Boot application, and we have added Spring Security to our class path, and we have seen the basic authentication done by Spring Security. So we have checked out slash login and slash logout pages, and we have also understood how Spring Security actually does the authentication on a high level. We have seen that Spring Security has a bunch of filters, which every filter is basically responsible for different types of action. One is for authentication, and one is for authorization. And also there are some other filters as well. And also in the second video, we went into some of the Spring Security jars, and notably we went to Spring Security Core jar and Spring Security Web jar, and we have understood how Spring Security does the authentication internally. So with that understanding, if we haven't gone to that video, I highly recommend it, because if we understand Spring Security internal, so then when we do any configurations, it will be easy to understand why we are doing that. Without getting late, let us start this video. So in this video, as I said, we'll be doing configuring in-memory authentication for a Spring Boot application. And also we'll be doing this authentication for a default login page, which has been added by Spring Security. And also at the end, we'll also create our own HTML file. We'll add Spring Boot starter time-lift dependency to our class path, so that we can give the so that Spring MEC can submit our time-lift templates. Time-lift templates will be using HTML files to the view resolver, such that it can render that view. So basically, we'll be doing authentication for a first default login page, and then we'll go into the custom login page. Yeah. Before going to the code, I'm planning to answer a couple of questions. So the question is here. So until now we have been saying configure. We have to configure Spring Security for in-memory authentication. So, what does it really mean? What does configure Spring Security really mean? So, basically, it means two things. Whenever a user goes to slash login page, by default it is the one. So, if it doesn't change, so whenever user goes to slash login page, when we add a Spring Security, so the authentication logic inside the Spring Security will get triggered. So in the authentication logic, it will cross-check the credentials, username and password sent by the user with the user details it has. So for authentication, some user data should be configured to the Spring Security, so that it can be compared against the request credentials and do an authentication. For that, first we need to specify the user details to the Spring Security. Yeah. So, and the next thing is we have to say the type of authentication to Spring Security. So, Spring Security by default provides many different types of authentication. So, one is in memory, JDBC as well, caching, and also we can tell Spring Security to use our custom authentication logic as well. So, for that, this is the second configuration which we need to do. We need to tell Spring Security, I want to use an in-memory type of authentication, and also here are the user details I'm providing you, so that you can cross check when user sends the request. Yeah, so these are the two things which we going to need to be configuring. So this is what I meant configure Spring Security for in-memory authentication meant. Now, the next question which it comes naturally is, now I have said we have to configure user details and the type of authentication, but we don't know where do we need to configure it. So which objects of Spring Security actually maintains this information? So so that if we know to which or where Spring Security stores it, then we'll have a better idea of how to configure the values to that objects. So basically, if you can see this flow diagram here, Whenever we give any user details, username and password strings to the Spring Security, by default it's going to be using this class called user details. So this user details basically is an interface. So some of the implementations of this interface objects can be created. So using whenever an object, it will basically, when we give an string username and password, going to be creating an object using the implementation of this interface by taking our username and password and creating an object. Basically, our username details will be converted into this user details object format, and this user details basically will be stored or will be associated with a service called user data service. So what does user data service does? So as the name suggests, user data service basically manages the user details object. So basically, the responsibility of this service is like this. So whenever user triggers the authentication logic, whenever the user wants to authenticate, basically whenever user go to slash login page, by default it is the one, and sends the request, our authentication logic will, Spring Security authentication logic will get triggered, and Spring Security, the authentication logic will contact the user details service. So for the user details object, so basically the authentication logic will send the username from the request sent by the user, and it will be sending it to the user data service, and it will ask the to send the user details object. So basically every user data service, so it is an interface. So it has multiple implementations. Let me show you that as well. So this we already talked it in the Spring Security video series part 2 as well. So here we have an user data interface. It has multiple implementations. Caching, user data manager is it, which extends this interface, and we have in-memory user data manager. We have JDBC user data manager, and SM static class as well. So basically, these are the implementations of this. So whenever user request try to go to slash login page by, and whenever so that authentication logic will send a username to the user data service, and user data service will have an association with user details. The association can be of different types depending on the type of implementation, and the user details will be service will be sending the user data object. So in this video, as we are talking about in-memory authentication, basically we need to create an object of using this in-memory user details manager object, and we need to associate the user details with this class. So basically, as the name suggests, it is in memory. So we need to this in-memory user details manager will have an field. Let me just quickly show you that as well. So if you go to this, so this is we are in Spring Security Kocha. So basically, this class has a field called map, which stores the key string, and it is the username, and it will store the user data object. This is a mutable user data object. This extends our user data interface. Yeah, so basically it will store the user information which are provided in this map. So basically we have to create a user data object and populate the this map of this in-memory user data manager. So we will create an object of this, and also object of this object will be created based on the user data which you have provided, string and password, and we'll be populating the map of this in-memory user data object. Yeah, so this is what I meant when I was saying the first configuration, which is the to specify the user details to Spring Security. So it means that we have to specify the user details to the in-memory user details manager object. So this is what is about the first point. The second point, we need to specify the type of authentication for Spring Security to do. So, as I previously said, whenever authentication logic begins its processing, it will send a request to the user, one of the implementation of the user data service object. So, so for that, we need to tell the authentication logic that to use in-memory user details manager. So since we have assigned our user details info to in-memory user details manager object, we need to tell to authentication logic to use this object, not the JDBC, not the caching this one. For that, we need to specify, we need to set the value of this field called user data service. So this field is basically of type user data service, and this is a field of the class called DAO authentication provider. So what is the role of DAO authentication provider? The role of the authentication provider is to tell the Spring Security authentication logic to use this type of authentication. So whenever we create an in-memory user, whenever we create an object of in-memory user details manager and set the user details and associate the user details to that object, we basically need to get this object and set to this field value. So since this is of type user data and this is also of as well implements user data, so we can create an object of this and set it to this, such that when authentication logic begins its processing, it will ask for the user data service object. So that if we set the in-memory user details manager object, it will be returning this, such that whenever it needs to do authentication, it will send an it will send the username to the in-memory user details manager and will ask for the relevant user details object so that it can do the authentication. So this is what I meant when I was saying the to specify the type of authentication to Spring Security. That means that we have to set the user details field of this class called DAO authentication provider. So basically we need to configure these two things, the user details to the user data service object, and this user data service object we need to associate with this user data field of this DAO authentication provider. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Now till now we have seen what does configurations really mean, and we have seen where the Spring Security actually stores it, so that we can have a better idea on how to configure it. Now, the next question is, third and final question is, when do we need to add these configurations to Spring Security? And also how to do that in the code. So, basically, in Spring Boot 3x, so since I have said we have to create an object of user data service, and also we need to set it to the authentication provider. So basically, in Spring Boot 3x, we basically have to create an bean of type in memory user details manager. So we can expose bean which is of type user data service. In that bean method, basically I will create a bean method and annotate with this at the red bean, and in that bean I will be creating this in-memory user details manager object, this in-memory user details manager object, and to which I'll set this user details object, and I'll be returning that. So that's how we create a bean of user data service, such that basically whenever we add Spring Security to our class path, during the bean installation flow, if we don't do any changes during the bean installation flow, it's gonna be setting doing the configurations. Basically it means the setting values to these two fields, so they're gonna be happening during the bean installation flow. So so that now when we expose a bean of type user data service, basically during the bean installation flow, before calling the set method to set the value of this field of this class, it's gonna be scanning our bean factory for the bean of type user data service, and if it finds any bean of this type, it's gonna be directly be using our bean to set the value to this field. So so that's how it happens under the hood. So basically to set our configurations, we need to create a bean of type user data service. Yeah, so this is for authorization. Yeah, for authentication we basically need to do the same thing. For that we need to create a bean of type security filter chain, and we'll be setting all our configurations to this security filter chain. Yeah, so we have till now we have seen what to do, what does configurations mean, and where does Spring Security stores that configurations, and we have seen when to do that configurations and how to. We have also seen how to do that. Now let's just go to the code and start coding. Yeah, so I have created a basic Spring Boot applications. Over here, I have this views. I have a couple of views. One of the view is an home. So I have configured this home to this slash home URL, and also I have a different view, another view which is hello, and I have configured associated this with this slash hello URL. Yeah, so this is the base two things which I have, nothing fancy. We have an home HTML file with an heading hello, and sorry, hello HTML file, and home HTML file where you have clicked a link to go to this home HTML file. Let me just quickly run this. And also, if you can see our dependencies, I have added Spring Boot security, uh, and also I have added time lifts since using the time lift templates, and I have added test implementations of Spring Starter and Spring Boot security as well. Yeah, so this is the application we have till now. Now let us secure these two home and hello URLs. So you can see I have started the application, and over here I can see that default it has printed using generated password in the logs. Now let me, since I have added Spring Security to our class path, by default Spring Security gonna be creating a slash login page and ask us to log in. So for the login page, this is the password we should use. So let's just quickly test that. Let me just fire up the URL home. So I was trying to access this home URL. I got redirected to this slash login page. Now let me just use this password, and the default it will Spring Security will create a default user, and the username will be the user itself. Now let's log in. You can see we got logged in, and we got logged into homepage. And if you click to here, we came to this slash hello page. So I think seems that there is an error in the link one. Let me just change the URL. Yeah, we can see that we have came to slash hello URL as well. Yeah, so this is what we have now. Basically, we have a default user. We have only one user which has been created by Spring Security, but in real world case it is not the case, right? We need to have multiple users. So during in-memory authentication configurations, we'll be setting multiple users and doing configurations. Yeah, now let us just start the configurations. For that, I am going to create a class called security config, and let me just to this component over here. As we have talked about, for setting authorization we need to create a bean of type user data service, and let me annotate with this the red bean. Now over here, as we have discussed, we need to create an object of type in memory user data matcher, and to that we have to set the this object user data object. For that, first I'm going to create an user details object. So basically, this user data is an interface, and we'll be using one of the implementations. We'll be using user implementation. This is an immutable one. So I'll be creating an object of this, and yeah. So to this constructor, we can give two things. We can give password, username, and the authorities as well. Yeah, since we need to give an authorities, so for authorities we're gonna be needing to create an object which extends this granted authority. This granted authority is basically an interface. For that, we'll just before creating this user data object, let me just create an granted authority object as well. For that, I'm going to use this granted. Let me just name it as user authority. Okay. And let me just these are a couple of implementation of granted authority, and I'm going to use simple granted authority, which will take string. The string I will be giving as a user. Yeah. Now to this user constructor, first I need to give the username, followed by password, followed by a collection of granted authority objects. For that, I'm going to create the new list. Task list. This arrest or task list basically gives an immutable one. So to make this mutable, have been wrapped it along with new array list, so that it will become mutable. Yeah, now I have user details object. Now we just create a different one more user as well. So and also I'm going to name it as admin user, and this is admin password. Let me give it as admin itself, and also going to create a new authority, which will be as admin authority, and the string it will take is admin and admin authority. Yeah, so it's fine. Yeah, now let us just create an in-memory user data object. So this constructor basically takes three things. Basically takes these things. It can take a collection of user data, or it can take a array of user data, or it can take a field called properties. So in this case, since we have two user data object, we are going to use second type. For that, I'm going to specify user data followed by admin user. Yeah. Now we have created a bean of type user data service. We have created this object to which we have injected our user data object. User data object has been created with using our custom hard-coded username and password. Yeah, now let me just keep a breakpoint and rerun this. So the reason why I have kept the breakpoint is I have been saying that this configurations will be set during configured during the initial flow. Let me want. I just want to demonstrate that as well. So if you see this in the stack trace, we can see that from abstract bean factory we have been starting. So from this bean factory, it has been over somewhere. We'll be looping through the beans it has, and it will be initializing all the beans. So it will seem the same. It has been coming here and creating a bean of this. And let me just mute it and run this. Since we have added the authentication, let us just go and test our test whether it is working fine or not. Now let me come here and just reload this. Yeah, let me log in as Kiran and Kiran. And if I click on sign in, it will with an error. It go not gonna log in. Why it was not logged in? So now if we go to our console page, we can see an password encoder error. Yeah. So over here we can see there is no password encoder for the ID and null. So what does it was saying is whenever we are configuring the whenever we are configuring our hard coded values to Spring Security, it it gonna be asking for any password encoder, so that it can be, even it can be no ops password encoder, which such that no ops will don't encode anything. So basically it will ask for a password encoder such that it can use it on uh, top of the password which has been sent by the user. So whenever I type the user details over here, and whenever I send this user details, so internally when Spring Security goes into its authentication logic, it gonna be and when it gonna when then it gonna be getting the user details from the user data service object, and then when it does the comparison between the request password and the user password, it's going to be using the password encoder which has been used for the time when we are configuring our hard coded values, and it's going to be encoding the password given by the user. It's going to encode this password, and it's going to be comparing this encoded format with the saved encoded format. For that we need to give our password encoder. This password encoder will be used for two things. Whenever it's going to be setting the user data, it's going to be encode it using the password encoder, and also whenever it's going to be comparing the request password and saved password, it's going to be using that as well. For that, we need to expose another bean called of type password encoder. Yeah, let me just name it as bean, and yeah, let me just create an object of bcrypt encoder and return that. Yeah, this should be fine. Yeah, seems like this error return outside statement. Public encoder. Yeah, sorry. Here we have created a bean of this. So as I said, this password encoder will be used at two places. One is when it configures Spring security internally. When it configures this user details to Spring security internally, at that point of time, it's gonna be using password encoder to encode this password, and also when user sends an authentication request as well. So for when it does the authentication request, basically Spring Security gonna look out for scan for the bean of type password encoder, and it's gonna be using that. But when it gonna be when we are configuring it, it's not gonna be scanning for this password encoder. We need to manually uh, encode the password encoder when we are configuring this. For that, I'm going to pass this password encoder object. Basically these objects will be from this bean. So I'm going to be encoding this password dot. I'm going to be using encode. This encode method basically takes an car sequence, as we can see here. Basically if we go to this car sequence, this is interface, and one of the type is string. So that we can give our any type of string to this so that it can encode it. Similarly, I'll be using on top of this password encoder dot encode. It will take the car sequence. Since it string is an implementation of car sequence, it will not be a problem. Yeah, now let us just rerun our application. Now let us just try to log in. Now it should work fine. Yeah, Kiran home. Yeah, we didn't have slash URL, right, such that it is saying another. Let me just try to go to slash home. Yeah, we came to slash home page. And also let me try to go to slash hello. Yeah, we came to slash hello page as well. So this is how we can set our in-memory configurations. We just need to create a bean, and to that bean we need to set our user data object. As we have talked here, we need to create a user data object and set to this object. This is the only thing we need to do, so that this object, so this bean will be used whenever user goes to this slash login page, enters this password. Whenever before coming to this URL, it's gonna be using our user data object, because during the bean insertion flow, it's gonna be using this bean to set the value to this DAO authentication provider. So let me just quickly show that as well. Let me just copy this and go to that DAO authentication provider, and let me keep a breakpoint in this set user details service method, and let me unmute this, and okay, let us close this, terminate this. Let me just return. Yeah, now we can see it will hit here. Now if we go one level below this stack trace, over here we should see here. Yeah, so over here in this line, when it reaches here, it's gonna be calling this method get beans or not. Basically this method will take any bean type. So it will take any bean type, class type, and it will return the class of type, the input which I have given, by querying from the bean factory. So basically here it is trying to query from the application context and get the bean. So it's gonna be querying our application context and get this bean, and from this bean it's gonna be using the same bean to set to this DAO authentication provider. So over here it is setting the our object to this. So since here when it scans for this bean of type user data service, Since we have already exposed a bean of type this, it's going to be getting returning that, and it's going to be used to set it to this dev authentication provider. Yeah, so this is how it's going to be done on the hood. Now, since we have seen authentication, we shall also see authorization as well. For that, we have to expose a bean of type security filter chain. For that, let us create a new method. Yeah, let us come to this, and let me create a new public method and security filter chain, security filter chain, this. So this security filter chain, actually basically this is an interface. So let me just use an HTTP security method. So if we set our configurations to this HTTP security method, and if you build this, it will basically return this security filter chain. Let me just annotate this bean. Yeah, now I have just annotated with this red bean so that I am not going to change the scope to anything. Let us keep it as singleton. Now here I will just configure my authorization configurations as well. So let me inject our configurations to this object. For that, we have to execute a chain of methods on this. So since we are talking about Spring Boot 3x, in Spring Boot 3x, I mean it can depending on the version you might use. If you use Spring Boot 3.1 or n 3.2, basically it will be, we need to do different type of configuration. It is not uh, it is not a major difference. It is, there is a slight difference. So if you use Spring Boot 3.1, this is the chain of methods which you need to execute, which is authorized HTTP request. Basically, this method is of class HTTP security, so we need to call this method authorization HTTP request, and then followed by request matches. This will take a bunch of URLs, and then followed by a method which is the core rule which we need to set. So this X means the rule. So the X can be authenticated, permit all, or has any authority, or has any roles. So basically what does it say is, so for the URLs mentioned in this request mappers, we are setting a rule to be authenticated or to be permitted without authentication, or to be checking whether the user which has been trying to access this URL has this authority or not, whether this has this role or not. So basically this is what this method says. So and also, if you want to set a rule on all the URLs which you have, we can replace this whole thing with any request method. If you use that, you're going to be setting this rule for all the URLs. And also this is for Spring Boot 3.1 or 3.0, these things. And for this, if you from Spring point 6 2 points something from that onwards, basically we need to create a lambda inside this authorization request. Basically we need to create input. The input should be on functional interface. For that, we'll start a lambda, and inside the lambda we will be using this methods request matches dot the X can be the same authenticated permit all has any authority. This over here it is a chain of methods. Over here we need to create a functional interface inside the authorization request. So yeah, so the same thing for this here set of URLs, we'll be setting a rule. And also if you want to set a rule for all the URLs, we can use the any request instead of this request matches. Yeah, so this is how we will be doing it. So in my application which I created, basically I was using Spring Boot 3.2.6. For that I need to follow this type of configurations. So let us do that. First, we need to call this authenticate HTTP request. We'll just start a lambda auth, and for to that we need to execute a chain of methods. First, request matches. So since we have two URLs, one is home and one is hello. Let us just give access for home to user and hello to admin. Yeah, so for that I'll just give as home, and then I'll set the rule to be authenticated, and then we can set our next rule, request matches, that is for this URL hello, and the for rule for this is permit all. So here, before doing the authorization, let me just demonstrate these two methods as well. We need to match the method signature as of as okay. Sorry, we need to change the method signature since it might throw in exception. Yeah. So before demonstrating this authorization methods, let me just demonstrate this authenticate and permit all as well. Basically, these two methods are for basically, if we can say that it is basically for authorization, to limit authorization for, sorry, not authorization, for the authentication for certain URLs. So if we say to be authenticated, this URLs will be authenticated. If we say permit all, it not going to be doing any authentication. But it will go through the Spring security filter chain. It will the Spring security will add the security headers to the request when it's sent, even if we have permit all. So let me just build it, and also we need to set this form type of login we need. So for now, since for now first starting we'll be going with this form login, which is the default one, and then let me just build this. Let me just return this. So this should be fine. Missing return statement. Maybe we might have skipped an bracket. This should be fine. This should be fine. Yeah, I think they're asking wrong. Maybe. Yeah, no, let me just rerun the application. Now, to check this whether it is working or not, let me try to access this slash hello first. I'll just reload this. We can see that we got logged in without, we can access this URL without any authorization. If I try the same for slash home, it's gonna be redirecting us to this login page. Let me just quickly sign in, and we can see we can access the slash home now. We can also access slash hello now. So this is how we can limit the authentication to the URLs. Now we shall do how to do the authorization as well. For that, I'm gonna be doing the authorization for home only for user type. So this basically takes a string, and for this I'm gonna be setting it as dot has any authority as admin. So basically, when user sends the request to the slash login URL, basically when it for authorization, basically it gonna be checking all the rules sequentially. So when I go to the URL and type username and password and send the request, internally when it need to check the authorization, it will first check if this request matches. So if I try to load this slash home, it's gonna be redirecting. First let me just log out. Yeah, now if I try to log in, go to the slash home, it's gonna be redirecting to the slash login page. Now if when I click on sign in, basically we are trying to access the slash home page. So it will be checking all the rules sequentially. First, when it matches the if it matches this or URL which user has been trying to access matches this a certain rule, it's going to be checking the rule can be authenticated, permit all, or checking the authorities. So it will be checking the role of that particular user. This user authority is user. So basically it's going to be comparing this string with the string used in this has any authority. Basically it's going to be doing a string to string comparison for checking that. Here I've been using here we have couple of as we said, we have couple of methods. Dot has any authority, has any role, has authority, has role. This has authority has role basically takes one string. This two takes a array. So for now I'll be using has authority. Yeah, so this should be fine. Now we have, let me just rerun this and try to let us check this configuration whether it is working fine or not. For that, I'm gonna be try to access a slash home URL using this admin credentials. Yeah, let me just log into this with this credentials, Kiran. Let me just sign in. Yeah, now we got an error. Not an error. It seems like we didn't got authorized. Let me just run this login page and Kiran. Yeah, we can see we came to the slash URL. Let me just try to access the slash home. We can see that we can access the slash home URL as it has been authorized for this user role. So as this credentials has the role of user, it can be accessed. Now let us check for this URL. We can see it was been throwing an error saying you can't authorize this page within 403 error. Yeah, so we can see that our authorization has been working fine. So basically we can set any type any rule for any type of URL. This is what our authorization configurations are. Here we are using these URLs, the strings over here. So for this URL matching, basically Spring Security supports two languages. One is and one is this regex pattern. So here we are using and. It will also support this regex as well. For that you need to use this checks request matcher dot reject matcher. Over here you can give your pattern. You can give as suppose if it is alphanumeric, you can give it as this head to chat 09. So so that your URL if your URL is as alphanumeric, suppose if your URL has an username to be sent to the controller. Yeah. So if the pattern is like an alphanumeric, you can use this rejection pattern as well instead of using this AND language. Yeah, so this is what our authorization configurations, and this is what our authentication configuration. We basically have created two beans, and also till now we have configured our authorization for a default login page which has been added for this by this Spring Security. So if you want to create our custom login page and if you want to do authentication and authorization on top of it, we can do that as well. For that, basically first let me just create an HTML file. I'm not going to show you all the coding of this HTML file. I'm just going to, I have already coded for it, and I'll just give you an overview of that page. Let me just name it as main login page. Yeah. So this is what my HTML HTML5 page for my login. So over here in headers, I have included the styles as well, and in the body, I have this. As this is where the main content goes. I have created a form. So and also I have been using time leaf so that I want to use some attributes like action in this HTML file. So here we are saying to whenever after this form gets submitted, we are asking to submit to this URL. Yeah, so we are asking to submit to this main URL, and also the method mapping as post. Then we here over here we have label for username and the input for username, and the same we have label for password and the input type of a password. Then followed by we have button to submit it, and then we have some query parameters as well. Over here we are saying if there is an error with the credentials, we are asking us to display this in memory user details password message on top of form. And if after successful logout, we have been asking to load this URL on top of form. You have been logged in. Yeah, so these are two things. This is what I have, the HTML file. So let us just expose a new URL for our login page. For that, I'm going to add the login page can be main login page. Let us name it as login. Login login, and to this login page, I'm going to set this view. The view is our this main login page. Yeah, so basically when user tries to go to this URL instead of this page, you're gonna be seeing this URL. Let me just quickly run this to check whether it is working fine or not. Now, if we reload this, the reason it was we are trying it was still showing the slash login page. It is because we haven't configured Spring Security to not use this. For that, we need to go to the security config, and over here when we are setting our authorization configurations, over here we have set form login to be default. Over here we have to remove this. We have to create an function interface, and I have to set the login page as slash login dot. If the login is successfully authenticated and authenticated, we're gonna be accessing the default success URL. For that, I'll be using the slash home. So since this is should be default success URL, I'm just gonna be asking for authentication, not any authorization, so that everyone can access this if they have been authorized. Yeah, so this is what we need. Now let me just name this as main login page, and copy this and change it over here as well. Now we submit it. Yeah, so let me just quickly explain what I have done. So here I have exposed a view slash login. This view basically we are exposing our main login page to this URL, and I have changed the form login configurations to not use default login page, and I have been asking Spring Security to look out for the authentication request on this URL, not the slash login URL, which it usually expects it. And then, if it is successfully authenticated, I have been asking Spring Security to forward it to this home URL. And in this main page, after this form got successfully submitted, I have been asking to submit the details to the slash main login page. So basically, this slash URL login URL will be rendering this main view object, and in this main view object, after we submit it, we're gonna be submitting to this main login page. This is main login page URL. This is the URL which Spring Boot looks out for this authentication logic and to do the authorization as well. So let me just quickly rerun this. Let me just rerun our application. Now we can see the issue we are not able to load the URL is because of this missing thing. So we have created an URL, but we haven't set the rule to permit every user to access this URL. For that, we need to explicitly set it, because if we don't set any URL to get permitted, and if we don't ignore it in the filter chain as well, by default this controller and the Spring MVC will be behind the authentication filter. Basically, not authentication, the authorization filter. Basically, the authorization will be done using this authorization filter. So basically, this our Spring HTTP controller will be behind the our authorization filter. So for that, as it is behind the authorization filter, it expects the HTTP controller to get authenticated. and also it will expect to sorry to get authorized. So since we haven't have any authorization configurations for this, it was not letting us to load this URL. So for that we have to set our permit rules to permit this login page for all. That's why that was the case. So let me just read on the application. Yeah, slash login. Now let me go to this. Yeah. Now, if I can see, this is not the default login page. This is our custom login page which I have created. Now, let me just log in. You can see that we have successfully authenticated and we got redirected to this slash home URL. As we have said, to redirect us to forward us to this URL if it is successfully authenticated. And if we then we can also check the whether authorization is working fine or not. This hello URL is only for admin since I have logged in with this user authority user. So let us check whether I can access this URL or not. Yeah, we can see that it has been an authorization error by 403 error. Yeah, so authorization is working fine. Yeah, till now we have seen how to configure authentication and authorization. For authentication, we have to expose a pin of user data service pin such that during a pin insertion flow, this pin will be scanned and will be used to set the value to this field of this Dove authentication provider. And to this user details object, we have configured our user details in the form of this user details object. So this is for authentication configuration, and for authorization, we have been configured. We have exposed a bin of type security filter chain, and we to create this object we have used this HTTP security object, and on top of that we have been used mainly used this method authorization request, and inside this we have created a function interface where we can set our use for every URL. And first we have seen the authorization for a basic authentication and authorization for a default form login, and then we have created a main login page, custom login page, and we have when we have configured Spring security for that login page as well. Yeah, so this is what we have seen till now. Yeah, so seems like that's it for this video. Yeah. So that's it for this video. We have seen in this video we have seen configuration of in-memory authentication for Spring Boot 3x. Yeah, thank you.